And there's 9 billion people on this planet. We don't all need to follow the same diet. And we shouldn't all follow the same diet. And it is okay for me to have a healthy diet that is very different than your healthy diet. And we can both have equally healthy diets that are working well for our individual makeup metabolically and digestively and also just preference wise and culturally.
I was in physical pain and was like run around to like doctor appointments and like scouring the internet. And then I was at the library and like randomly, like nobody recommended this. I didn't look anything up. I was just walking down like the health and nutrition aisle or whatever they have. And I found your book. And like 72 hours later, I was like feeling so much better.
Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman. I'm a family man, a coach, a wannabe athlete. After earning 3 master's degrees and countless certifications, I've decided that podcasting is how I'm going to continue my education in all things wellness, longevity, and performance. Join me to learn along.
I don't know if I've got some other books that have like helped me out with like back pain and like other stuff, but like if you want an example for me of something that just like had a pretty big impact on me pretty quickly,
Was it
that was
magnesium? What was it in the book? Was it magnesium? Was it FODMAPs? What helped you?
it was FODMAP all the way.
Mm.
I cleaned up some of that stuff, and it's the thing with that delayed consequences. I just could not wrap my mind around what was going on.
Yep.
And yeah, you just anyways, it
Yay.
was awesome. And like I have just been you've got a fan in me, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Um and what basically happens since I found your
Great.
book is like every 3 or 4 weeks I have an athlete, and now I'm at the point where I ask. It happens more now because I ask ahead of time. It's like part of my screening process is like, who has a bad stomach in here? And then I make them do the quiz and I have them come talk to me.
Awesome.
But
Yeah.
even without that, every 3 or 4 weeks, somebody comes to me and just says like, my stomach hurts all the time. I'm like, I got something for you. Uh, and so like for me, um, it was like a culmination of things. It was like we went peach picking and we had a bunch of peaches in our house, and I was eating like 2 or 3 a day for a couple weeks, and then that was the game changer, I think. Um, but when they come to me and they talk about how their belly hurts, well, I've only known about your book for 5 or 6 years here.
It's only 7 years old, so
Okay, so yeah. Um, but I've been in personal training for like 19 or 20 years. So I honestly I don't know what I was telling people before I had your book. I'm like, did I just like tell them tough luck or like only eat me? I don't know what I was telling them, but now it's an awesome tool to have.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're using it exactly how I meant it to be used, which is, I work in New York. I'm one person. I don't like a lot of people don't have access, not just to a dietitian, but also to a dietitian who specializes in GI, which is we're a pretty small group of specialist GI dietitians. And, a lot of us aren't covered by insurance. And so like I wanted to write a book that someone who doesn't have access to me geographically or financially could spend $20 on a book, or even in your case, get it from the library and not spend a dollar.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
and
I, I did I did buy it eventually once
Thank you. I
once I
appreciate
knew
it.
once I knew what was going on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that's okay if you didn't, right? Like that's what libraries are for. I mean, I take out a ton of audiobooks at my library, so it's fine. But to have the quiz, and the quizzes for both of my books are posted on my website for free. So that, you can kind of go through the diagnostic. The quiz is what I would ask you if basically like a shorter version of what the kinds of things I would be probing for in my office with a patient. And I really think that it works. Like for most people, the quiz gets to the right diagnosis. It's really, I've gotten tons of feedback over the years that the quiz really works. And people are taking and going to their doctor, getting the right testing, getting the diagnosis confirmed. Like it's exactly what I'd hoped for when I wrote the book.
I even had 2 athletes who were that same thing. I'm having stomach issues or whatever. My doctor is going to have me do a breath test,
Yeah.
and I think they check for methane content in
Yeah.
your exhalations.
Methane and hydrogen. Yeah.
and we did the blow belly whisper test ahead of time, and it had SIBO and FODMAP as like their highlighted issue. And then they went and had the breath test, and it just confirmed it. So
I hear that all the time.
yeah,
All the time. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I mean, I couldn't be more pleased that the quiz is finding people who need it, and, people are getting help.
yeah. There's just it's for me. I mean, it's a good little trickle effect. You're helping people on
Yeah.
repeat down here. Yeah,
Guessing also, so that the population that you work with and that you teach, there people are using a lot of sports nutrition products. And, there's a ton of fructose in a lot of those products, like free fructose, for a variety of reasons. And, like different types of sugars and, and sugar alcohols and sweeteners and stuff. And athletes with sensitive stomachs, like, could really run into trouble with, like, I hear a lot of, like, marathoners with like runner's diarrhea and things like that. And a lot of the products that they're using can really aggravate that.
and I know those, like, all those talls, the erythritols and the other ones. They just like I can't chew gum. I can't whatever. So
That's
like
the peaches, right? Those are the peaches.
yeah,
But
it's
I mean, even if you don't have a bad stomach, anybody who eats enough of those, like, it will have a laxative effect, even if you have a very good stomach. Like, that's what they do. I mean, whatever, it's cherry season. And like, I don't have GI problems, but I ate too many cherries a couple of nights ago, and I was like, oh, yep, I ate too many cherries. Like, it happens. Like, that's
yeah,
what polyols do to the GI tract.
yeah. It just hit the nail on the head with me and so many other people that I've kind of spent time with.
Right.
And again, you have helped. Your writing and your material online has helped me out quite a bit. But for you, how did you get into basically the business of like saving stomachs and just helping people in the way that you do?
So GI and nutrition is a second career for me. So I only went back to school to become a dietitian when I was 30. So, please don't do too much math and figure out how old I am. And I had been doing corporate stuff before, and I just got very interested in nutrition from a personal standpoint, as I had a very busy lifestyle, lots of travel, eating out. Like, I just didn't feel healthy, and I just wanted to learn more about nutrition. And probably a year, maybe a year and a half into my studies of just general, the general course that you take to become a registered dietitian, one of my professors threw a diagram up on the board, and maybe I'll send you a picture of it so you can kind of see. It was this very simple line diagram of the GI tract and all the different segments of the small intestine, and it showed what nutrients were absorbed in what neighborhood of the small bowel. And it really like captured my interest, this idea that your intestine or your GI tract is a roadmap, and how intricate with with your nutrition status. And if there's a problem in this section, it's going to really cause these types of nutritional problems. And if there's a problem in this area of the GI tract, it's going to cause these issues. And I really just thought, for someone going into nutrition, the one-on-one relationship between the health and pathology of the GI tract and somebody's overall nutrition, like that close connection, was very gratifying and intriguing to me in a way that, like, maybe doing diabetes management wasn't. You could eat the right thing or the wrong thing when you have diabetes and you feel the same. You don't like feel it in the moment. Whereas in GI, as your own experience can attest to, you eat the right thing or the wrong thing and you feel it real quick. And your body gives you that great feedback. So I really got interested in GI very early in my nutrition studies. And right after I completed my master's degree and got my credential, I went straight to work for a gastroenterologist. That's the only jobs I ever looked for. It's the only job I wanted. I found a GI doctor who was willing to hire me right out of school. I worked with him for 11 years. And then during COVID, our practice merged with a much larger group practice. And he and I are still with that large group practice. And I've been with them for 4 years now. So
Um, I think we got lucky that you took that interest. That's made a big impact for me in particular.
amazing.
So you have a office. We call it. You call it an office? Do you call it a clinic?
Well, I work in a gastroenterology practice. So
Okay,
it's,
a,
there's a A doctor's office. I work
Okay,
at
a doctor's office, a practice. What are the top few issues that people are visiting you guys about, and what interventions do you make that a lot of people might just piggyback off of that?
Yeah. So the number one complaint is some combination of abdominal pain and bloating. And the number one reason for that is they are completely full of stool. Like probably 40 to 50% of the patients I see on a day-to-day basis are completely full of stool. And not all of them recognize that they're constipated. So some of them, yes, they're like, I've always been constipated. I skip days. I have hard bowel movement. Sure. But there is a substantial percentage of them who go every single day, would consider their bowel movements pretty normal. And when we x-ray them, they are full of stool. So that is the number one thing that I work on typically as far as who's coming to see me. And usually there is some combination intervention wise of like fiber manipulation. A lot of these people are eating way more fiber than their body seems able to to keep up with. So they're often getting some sort of, over-the-counter bowel regimen, some magnesium or, some Senna or something to kind of help them move things and really trying to pull back on like the massive fiber loading that a lot of them are doing. So that's probably the most common thing that I am seeing and doing in my work.
Interesting.
You look shocked.
And, well, because I read your book Regular. I've read Bloated Belly Whisperer as well as Regular. And Regular I Regular didn't have the impact on me yet. I didn't have the need for it, and it's not something that comes up in conversation as much. So I'm not using it to help people the way that I am Bloated Belly Whisperer. But I am surprised. I thought it was gonna be something more along the lines of just stomach pain and like food irritants or allergens. So that does surprise me. But with that, you're not talking about too little fiber. Can you comment on the low fiber? Is low fiber really that much of a risk, or what's going on with maybe somebody who's not taking in any fiber?
Yeah. So someone who has a very, very low fiber diet will often tell me that like, when I'm eating more fiber, I'm going and I'm feeling better. Right? Like that's a pretty obvious, easy thing. Like I take a full diet history, I see what someone's eating, I see that they eat no fiber. And so sometimes more fiber is the answer. Um, but I see some is eating a ton of fiber. And like I work in New York City, there's a lot of people who, like are really interested in this stuff and like they spend a lot of money on, their kale salads and their chia seeds and their, their flax seeds and like all the extra fiber stuff. And I see that their diet is like fiber on fiber on fiber and kale salads, whatever. And then I ask them, so tell me about your bowel movements. How often do you go? Like I go most days, like maybe 6 days a week. And I'm like, oh, how many times do you go? Like, oh, once, like one and done kind of person. I'm like, oh, and how would you describe your bowel movement? Small, medium, large? Like, medium, occasionally large. And I'm thinking, wow, if I ate as much fiber as you just told me you ate, I would not just go 5 or 6 days a week. I would go 7 days a week. And I would just not have one medium bowel movement a day. I would have like four enormous bowel movements a day. Like the amount of fiber that somebody eats not being commensurate with the amount of poop that is coming out of them is a huge red flag as far as the problem being too much fiber, not too little fiber.
Yeah, and then with additional fiber, you're feeding your gut bacteria, right? Now, so the mass that's in their colons, is that the fiber just hanging out? Is that extra microbiotic tissue? What's actually in there because of all that extra fiber?
So if you have regular, you'll see in chapter 1, I give a breakdown of what percentage of your stool is fiber, like is fiber versus dead cells. I mean, it's all of it.
Yeah.
Most of it is fiber and just water. And a very small percentage of it is like sort of dead cells and your body's own waste product, but it's mostly fiber.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And you talked about those kale cells that have an uptick. So they're so these people, their fiber intensive diet, they're trying to be health
They are
conscientious.
healthy. It is
Yeah.
an objectively healthy diet. There's nothing bad I would say about that diet. They're going to live till they're 100. They're not going to get cancer. They're not going to have heart disease. But the problem is they're very uncomfortable and
Yeah.
they're gassy and they're bloated and they're in pain and they're
Yeah.
canceling plans because, they can't keep up with it, So sometimes
Um,
too much is too much.
Um, yeah, I also heard that so like kale has grown in popularity as it's become this a superfood and a health food over the last probably 15-ish years or so, something like that. It's gotten more popular. Have you heard? I heard this and I believe it. It's the Do you know who the number one kale um purchaser was in America in 1995 in like the mid 90s? Have you heard that?
No,
Because I couldn't remember if it was in your book or not. It was Pizza Hut.
no way. That's not from my book.
If you recall, and I have like childhood memories, Pizza Hut used to, and maybe they still do. I haven't been inside a Pizza Hut in a few decades. Um, Pizza Hut used to have like buffets inside their like little restaurants, and kale was used as the bedding. They would come set the trays on kale, and the kale would be like the pretty stuff in between. And no,
The
they were just
garden.
it was like it was like tissue paper in like a gift bag. It was like they just threw it on there as like a
If it were really like tissue paper, people wouldn't be having such a hard time digesting it. It's like much
yeah.
coarser than tissue paper. Tissue paper at least dissolves in liquid. Kale is like kale doesn't dissolve. Kale's quite coarse.
And then I also not to like drag kale through the mud or anything, but I also understand kale has these calcium oxalates, and because uh, kale ingestion has gotten more popular, people are getting more kidney stones because those little I think they're calcium oxalates.
So I think
Um,
it's more spinach. So I don't think that the
oh,
vegetables in the cabbage family, the cruciferous vegetables, are actually very low oxalate. So I think kale and collards are actually low oxalate, but spinach is very high.
okay,
But
okay,
I'll have to double check now that I want to fact check myself.
okay. Well,
I mean,
yeah,
certainly, like, when people are juicing, large amounts of certain types of vegetables that are high oxalate, like that can be an issue for kidney stones if you are predisposed for sure.
okay. And then when these high fiber off the charts individuals come in, the number one thing is just to reduce fiber, or is it to drink more water, or to buy a squatty potty, or how do we
The
kind of?
first is it's not just to reduce fiber, but it's also to reduce the amount of very specific types of fiber. So, a lot of people who are either fiber loading because they're trying to be healthy, a lot of people on very low carb diets tend to eat a lot of like what we call insoluble fiber or roughage or coarse fiber because it's the lower carb stuff, salads, nuts, berries, seeds, like all that kind of fiber. It's not water soluble. It's called insoluble. And so if you take a pumpkin seed or a cashew nut or a piece of kale or lettuce or a cucumber skin or whatever, and you put that into water and you walked away for an hour and you came back, pull it out, it's just like a dripping wet piece of kale or a dripping wet nut. It doesn't absorb any moisture. It doesn't get viscous and gooey and gummy like something like oatmeal might if you put oats into water, right? Because
Right,
that's soluble fiber. And so the problem with insoluble fiber is it remains very bulky in the gut. I mean, however well you chew it is pretty much as broken down as it's going to be. It doesn't get gooey and viscous and doesn't shape shift. So it can be very bulky, it can take up a lot of space. And because it doesn't hold on to moisture, the longer it spends in your GI tract, the more dried out it is going to become because it doesn't have that sponge-like water retaining property. And so if you have slower transit time just genetically, constitutionally, or if you're already very backed up and so there's a little bit of a traffic jam in there and you keep fiber loading that type of fiber, it's going to get very hard, very dried out. It's going to sit and you're going to feel very, very full and bloated. And so it's not just I tell people eat less fiber, but eat less of that particular type of fiber and really eat, skew your fiber intake more towards those soluble sources, which are the fleshier fruits and vegetables that don't have skins and that are non-leafy. And if you are going to eat some of that coarser insoluble fiber, I have them kind of take down the particle size, throw it in a blender and make a green smoothie instead of eating a salad. Soup is liquid salad is what I always tell my patients. And so like just having it take up less physical space will often even make it more tolerable. Peanut butter instead of peanuts, getting more into those purees and those small particle size forms of that particular type of fiber can often be a lot more comfortable for people who don't want to give it up or who don't want to eat less of it.
Yeah. And you've taught, as we kind of like brush more on the like bowel movement schedules, you mentioned there's like a genetic component. Is that just saying that different people process, you said use the word transit. Different people transit things at different times? Should everybody be going once a day? What should we be doing?
I mean, whatever you're doing, if it feels good and you're comfortable and you're healthy, then it's fine, right? Like, there's a very wide range of what's considered normal in terms of bowel patterns. And so anywhere from one poop every 3 days to four poops a day is considered in a normal range. But having said that, you might be within that normal range and still feel horrible. You might go twice a day and it's not enough. Or maybe you're outside that normal range. Maybe you go once every 4 days, but in between those poops, you're not uncomfortable, you're not bloated, you have no pain, you don't have gas. And then on that fourth day, you go and it's big, enormous, relieving, easy, you feel great. I don't need you to go every single day just because that's in the normal range. So if you're pooping is a problem, it's a problem, regardless of what the statistics say. And, it's really about what feels best for you as an individual, because there's just such a wide range of what's considered normal.
Everybody's a snowflake, huh? We're all unique
We're
little.
unicorn snowflakes, that's us.
That's right. Okay, so you have. Okay, can I kind of like amend my question from a little earlier? I was asking for like the top issue people come and see you for, and gosh, I love that. I was not expecting that answer. Um, but one of the things that I really love about your work is that everybody's got a nutrition book, everybody has a diet book, but you are talking about uh, digestion and excretion. And why do we have 15 million nutrition books and diet books and so little material and so little knowledge is being shared on what's happening once it's past you know, past your teeth and going down? Because I have I'm fortunate to work with a lot of athletes, and a good percentage of you know a good percentage of my population, like there's always like somebody who's in pain and somebody who's struggling with it, and they're doing all the right things. They're eating the kale salads and the brown rices. They're doing all the things that people tell them they're supposed to eat, and then they have stomach issues and they don't know where to turn. And if I
Yeah.
didn't, and honestly, if I didn't just happen to pull your book off the shelf at the library, I'd be missing a lot of advice that I currently give them.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's so little on digestion and excretion? Is it taboo, or do people not know about it? Why is this information so limited?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that you hit the nail on the head as far as like until extremely recently, this was like a very stigmatizing thing to talk about. Like before like hot girl with IBS was trending on, social media, like hot girls did not have IBS, right? Like that was not something we talked about. It was not cute. It wasn't like something that we were naming and claiming and like, making cute and fun. It was embarrassing. It was stigmatizing. I mean, it was like nobody, you don't want to talk about like your farting or your diarrhea or your constipation. Like nobody wants to talk about that. It's embarrassing. And so you assume that if this was a problem for you, then like nobody else had it because nobody's talking about it and you don't talk to your friends about it. And I think in our society over the past several decades, so many things that used to be taboo and stigmatized, like all of those walls have been crumbling down, like mental health, like when I was little, like I didn't know anybody who was in therapy. Like nobody was in therapy. Like that, like psychiatrists were for crazy people. And like everybody's in therapy. You talk about your therapist like you talk about, your manicurist. And it's like the most normal, normalized thing. People didn't talk about HIV and AIDS. And now it's just like it's a virus, it's a chronic illness. And all the things that used to be stigmatized, like slowly we've just come to accept them as like this is part of the human experience, and like everybody goes through something of this. And so along with that, GI became less stigmatized. And I think concurrently, as the science of, microbiome research and the immune system, which everyone is so interested in immunity and autoimmunity, and understanding that this gut microbiome is this like entirely, they're calling it like a whole separate organ, basically. It's like this whole separate thing, and it plays this key role in immunity. Now, all of a sudden, everyone is fascinated by the gut microbiome and gut health. And so now not only is it not stigmatized, but it is like aspirational to seek out gut health and to talk about and analyze and dig into your GI function to understand what it could tell you about your gut health. I mean, not only is it not stigmatized, but it's like trendy now. So, I mean, we've really done this full, 180 on these issues. And I think social media has accelerated all of that, not just in gut health, but in all sorts of previously stigmatized things, when people just come forth and they start talking about their experiences and realize that there's millions and millions of people out there for whom that resonates, and you're not alone and you're not weird, and it's just like really common stuff.
Yeah, because for me, I went from having zero zero food limitations growing up. I picked up a little bit of like a lactose intolerance in my early 20s, and then I was fine for like the next 10 years. And like that was my only thing, is like, oh, too much milk kind of like disrupts my stomach or whatever. Um, and then all of a sudden, my as your book pointed out for me, I had this like SIBO situation, and then I needed to adhere to this new FODMAP diet that I had like I'd heard about it, but it was just like mentioned and then passed over so quickly. There wasn't there wasn't the material or the interest in me like learning about it. So I had basically no issues with food, and then I had only issues with food. And the fact that there's people walking around that they don't have insight or resources or anything like that, I mean, that's big. That you talk about them like changing the stigma, is that we're just, if your ankle hurt, you would go do something about it. But people have, you know, these gut issues that are just ruining their days, and they're just, what would they learn in the past? That sounds like a tough go.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of people, who have had issues for chronic issues for decades, probably have encountered a doctor at some point in their journey several decades ago, or even, sadly more recently, that told them like, it's just IBS, you'll have to deal with it. Like, you know, you're stressed out, do stress relief, like it's just your IBS, you're anxious. And first of all, it's not always IBS, although even if it is IBS, what do you mean just IBS? Like that is like very problematic for many people's quality of life. And I assure you that doing yoga is not a very effective treatment for most people's GI symptoms. And most people will still have symptoms when they're on vacation and very relaxed. And we have so many more treatments now. We have medications, we have behavioral health treatments, gut-directed hypnotherapy that is evidence-based, and cognitive behavioral therapy that's evidence-based. And we have diets now that are evidence-based. And I think there's also just so many more treatments that are available to patients now that weren't available even 20 years ago, when they were being diagnosed and told, like, you'll just have to live with it.
With that being said, um, you're talking about just learning that there's things they say you don't know what you don't know. So now people are learning things about what they don't know.
Yeah.
Um, what do you kind of, and I was seeking, and I've sought medical treatment for stomach issues. Um, and it has helped not at all. And that's how it goes sometimes. Um, what do you kind of wish or know that you kind of hope that other doctors would, or medical practitioners would be aware of, and maybe be guiding their patients with?
So look, my personal belief is that every gastroenterology practice in this country should either have a dietitian on staff or have a dietitian that they refer to on speed dial. Because the majority of patients that come in for help, to see a gastroenterologist, unless they're coming in just for their routine colorectal cancer screening, they turn 45 or 50 and they have to just get their, screening colonoscopy, unless it's them, the majority of patients you see for any other reason would probably benefit from seeing a GI specialized dietitian even just once. Chronic acid reflux, diarrhea problems, gas problems, constipation problems, diverticular disease, um, you know, uh, bloating, burping, fullness, pain. I mean, all of these things typically have some sort of dietary adjustment that will make them better. And that is the majority of what a GI doctor will see in outpatient practice, inflammatory bowel disease, all of it. Um, and the fact that most GI practices in this country do not have dietitians on staff, the fact that our practice is really an anomaly, that's not okay. I mean, like patient, and that's why, again, like that's why I wrote these books, is that most people don't have access to someone like me. There's when I go to like the big GI conferences, that the dietitians also kind of piggyback onto, maybe like 50, 60 of us are there from all over the country. And there's probably several hundred of us, with GI specialization, but that's not a lot for a country of 300 and something million people. And so, getting more dietitians in GI practices, I think, is the future.
Yeah, I know from my perspective, working at the university level, I've worked at a couple of universities, and sometimes we're looking for registered dietitians to come meet with our teams, to come work with specific individuals who maybe it's what they're eating or it's their perception of what they're eating, and it may, borderline into some mental health disordered eating. Or if we're trying to get somebody to teach a class, we have like a weird, like a surprising lack of registered dietitians around here. So uh, for my network, I don't have a whole lot in my cell phone to call and ask for, hey, do you want to teach this class or can you work with this athlete or anything like that? So I wonder if that space is set to grow, or I'm just curious. So
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is that, dietitians have more flexibility with telehealth than doctors do. So dietitians can practice out of state in like probably 20 something states in the country that don't require state level licensure. And so even if you don't have a dietitian on staff, if you go to the AGA, the American Gastroenterological Association website, I believe that it should be up and running. They have like a find a dietitian, like find a GI dietitian function where you can search by zip code and also search, hopefully by now if it's functional, where people are licensed. I think I can't practice. You're in St. Louis, or you're in Missouri, you said.
yeah,
I don't
correct.
I don't think that I can practice in Missouri, but you might be able to search for people who are like maybe like an Illinois dietitian who's licensed in Missouri kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like to
Yeah.
see where people have license. I'm licensed in like 3 or 4 states, and then I can practice in like maybe 20 more. And telehealth is great. I don't need to see somebody in person to help them. I can just talk to them and ask them a million questions. So I think telehealth makes the expertise a lot more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, just getting that information is just so huge, especially with all the subject matters covered, it, especially in that one. Other book is great as well, but that one I swear by and have a little bit more experience with. Um, so just like Kale, the perception of Kale has kind of changed maybe the industry a little bit. Moving past Kale, or maybe not, are there any diets that are like popping up, whether it's vegan, carnivore, there's a fruit fast thing that's getting hot right now. Are there any diets that are causing issues lately that you've been working with?
I mean, let's start with any extreme diet can cause issues in a susceptible person, right? Like I've had, I have plenty of patients who follow vegan diets, which is, it's a very specific, it's somewhat restrictive. And I have some patients who do amazing on a vegan diet. They're like, ever since I became vegan, I feel amazing. My energy's great. I poop like I'm so regular. I used to be constipated my whole life. The vegan diet's been amazing for me. And then I see the exact opposite. I have some patients who become vegan and they're having diarrhea all the time. They're super gassy and they're miserable. And then other ones who became super constipated because they're eating too much fiber and they can't keep up with it. So that one diet can affect three different people, three different ways. I have some people who to like go on to like a keto diet and they say like they feel amazing and their blood sugar is great and their cholesterol is great and they're super regular in the bathroom because they feel like carbs give them gas and carbs give them trouble. And then I have people going to keto diet and their cholesterol LDL jumps through the roof and like their blood is like solid. And they're constipated like all get out. And the same diet can impact different people different ways. And I think one of the disservices that, influencer culture and social media culture brings to the world is this dogmatism and this proselytizing that somehow there's one right diet that all human beings need to follow, and that because you had a good experience on it and you had a good outcome, everybody should follow your diet. And there's 9 billion people on this planet. We don't all need to follow the same diet. And we shouldn't all follow the same diet. And it is okay for me to have a healthy diet that is very different than your healthy diet. And we can both have equally healthy diets that are working well for our individual makeup metabolically and digestively and also just preference wise and culturally. And so I hate the dogmatism, and I hate the faddism. I see all sorts of different diets that work well for people, and I see all sorts of healthy diets that don't work well for people. And I mean, I hate to bring it back to kale. I have like nothing against kale, but like kale is super healthy. Like it's very nutritious, great, but not everyone feels good eating it. And not everyone needs to eat it, and not everybody should eat it. And, like we don't all have to eat all the same foods.
You are working at a GI practice. It sounds like you're doing some telehealth work as well, maybe.
I
Um,
see patients telehealth and in person, depending on what they prefer.
and then you've authored two books,
Mm,
Bloated Belly Whisperer and Regular.
yeah.
And then what is next for you in this career?
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there might be another book in me that I'm kind of mulling over right now. I'm not really sure if I'm going to go through with it. It's a lot to write a book. I do a lot of clinical supervision. So kind of I run groups for other dietitians where we kind of get together, like a small group of like 4 or 5 people, and we talk about difficult cases. And I really enjoy that. It's really nice because, being a dietitian is a pretty solitary career. It's just one-on-one with patients and, there's not a lot of like shop talk with your colleagues. And so it's kind of a nice way to talk to your colleagues and see what other people are seeing and hearing and doing. So I like doing that. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I finished a really big 2-year term in a community volunteer position that was like 20 hours a week, and I just finished it like 3 weeks ago. And so I just didn't even have any time to think about what's next for me. So this is kind of thinking about, what I want to do with some of that extra time now. And I don't know. If you have any ideas for me, I'm open to it.
I'll be thinking. Um, you mentioned the colleagues and a little bit of like isolation, but when you do get together and talk shop with your colleagues, how many of them does anybody disagree with your book, your work? Is this stuff that pretty much everybody knows, or are there people? What's going on with like the perception of the information that you put out in your mind?
I mean, look, the people who join my groups and are paying for my opinion, my advice, I mean, typically are people who will respect my opinion. Um, it's more just like people bringing me cases that they're stuck with. They're like, I tried this, it's not working. Like, what am I missing? Like, this is a really tough case for me. And then it's also just for other dietitians who maybe don't see the same volume of GI patients that I see or that other people, just to get more case exposure and more case experience to see some of the difficult stuff and some of the unusual stuff and practice reading test results, like those breath test results, learning how to read them and interpret them. And so a lot of it is just practice and learning from one another. Um, yeah, so and it's also just, sometimes we see really difficult people and really difficult problems. And sometimes you think like, wow, like is everyone who's like the most medically complicated person only coming to see me? Like, I wish maybe if I practiced somewhere else, it would just be a little bit less complicated. And then I kind of hear from my colleagues that they're also getting like really sick, really complicated people. And sometimes it's just like good to, okay, like I'm not alone. Like a lot of people are really coming up against some very, very challenging stuff and feeling sometimes overwhelmed by it. And like it's also just good to remind yourself that you're not alone in this world.
How about exercise and gut health? Is anybody ever coming in and you're saying you should maybe move a little bit more, or you're maybe overdoing it, or you got anything in that department?
Sure. I mean, well, we know that exercise has a very beneficial effect on the microbiome and the diversity of the microbiome and the health of the microbiome. So, exercise is, part of it, right? Sleep is also part of it. And so, like, all the things that we know are good for overall health, big surprise, are also generally good for gut health. And so, and there's also certainly people who feel that, like, movement, especially like some core work, like, people who are constipated, like lying down on the floor and doing like a 10-minute core routine or something after a little bit of coffee, like sometimes we'll even like kind of get the bowels going, like the jostling, like you'll hear it from your endurance athletes and the runners that like some of the reason that runners sometimes have to poop in the middle of a long run is like literally like the movement of the GI tract and the jostling. And so, sometimes movement, in general and especially around the core can stimulate movement in a really positive way. Now, obviously, if someone's diarrhea prone, like that can be a problem, right? And so sometimes you have to kind of manage backwards. But exercise for sure is good for regularity. It's definitely good for gut health. And for overall metabolic health, I think exercise is probably one of the best drugs for human health that there is. It's associated with improved cognitive health, improved lower cancer risk, lower metabolic disease risk. I mean, if exercise were a pill, everyone would be begging their doctors for it, but because but because it's not a pill and it actually requires effort, sometimes it takes more convincing.
You mentioned you've got some teenagers in the house. Are there any foods that you kind of don't let in the house, or that you're kind of wary of, to the point that you just know that even though it's sold, it shouldn't be eaten?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't buy soda, I don't buy juice, like I don't like sugary drinks, like are not in my unless there's like a brunch, like once or twice a year I'll buy orange juice for mimosas. But like we don't keep liquid sugar in the house. I don't do artificial sweeteners like sucralose and things like that and aspartame. Like I'd rather you have something that is low in real sugar. And if the kids are like begging for some sort of sports drink, and I capitulate, it's going to be a stevia, but it's not going to be like, the artificial stuff. Hot dogs, I think are problematic. Like, like the processed meats and hot dogs and things like that are just not stuff that I buy or bring into the house. But other than that, I mean, like we're not, we're omnivores, we eat a lot of plants, whatever, but like we're not vegetarian, we're not vegans. We cook a lot, we eat homemade food, we eat real stuff. Um, I don't restrict all sugar, I don't restrict all snack foods because I think that sometimes that being too restrictive also can breed a lot of problematic, more like binge type behavior.
Hmm.
And I think also it's important before I send my kids off to college, I want them to learn how to self-regulate and how to be able to be around snacky foods and sweet foods and indulgent foods and not, you know, and figure out how to fit that into a diet. And so I think it's actually important for them to learn that at home before I send them off into the world in 4 years. So, we're like some of the basic big stuff we keep out of here, but on any given day, if you walk by and open my snack cabinet, like there probably some cookies in there, and like we keep some chocolate with hazelnuts all around usually. And in the summertime, there's ice cream in the freezer. So we're not like, this isn't like some sort of like a detox getaway place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that with having young kids at home, the you get you get you make up your mind about how they're gonna eat healthier than all the average people and all these things. Um, and how you love them so much when they're little, and you're like, gosh, they've never eaten junk food or drank soda yet. Like, how long can I keep that going? And then, well, I'm not their only caretaker, so it ended earlier than I wanted. But I think about that that long term, the ability to self-regulate, like you were saying. It's just they've been around ice cream and soda, and they've had cookies and all this other stuff. Um, and my daughter, she she just doesn't even like that stuff. She has like a little bit, but like if we go to a birthday party, she will eat. I'll give her like half of a piece of cake that the other kids are getting pieces like this, and I'll get in there and cut it in half before it gets to her, and she eats like a third of it. And then my son is like finding ways to get more cake, and just he just has that sweet tooth. So,
Yeah. Sounds
but
like my kids.
yeah, but when they leave, their diet is better than average, and they've experienced balance. So, um,
I mean, it's important for our kids, I think, to learn like the role for those foods, right? So like to learn like what dinner looks like what a healthy plate looks like, and what when I serve a meal, like what are the components of a balanced, healthy meal? And then when do we eat sweets and how do we eat sweets? Like maybe like I wouldn't necessarily treat, especially when the kids are little, like I would never treat like a cookie as like a snack. A cookie was a dessert, right? A snack was like real food just in a small portion. So it was like yogurt or cheese sticks or, like grapes, or it was, more whole food based stuff. And cookies were dessert,
yeah,
and we don't eat dessert after every single meal, right?
yeah,
So it wasn't like you don't get sugar, but to learn what role I wanted sugar to play in their lives. And I kept a lot less of it in the house when they were younger. And like, as your kids get older, the way that you are around food and the foods that are available will probably change. Like when my kids were very little, we went like trick or treating, like we went to like a few other houses where they were giving out stickers and tattoos and pencils because they were two and they didn't need candy. And then when they started to get to a certain age, it was like, okay, you can trick or treat as much as you want. You get to keep this many pieces of candy, and then I'll buy back the rest. And as they get older, the number they got to
yeah.
keep increased. And so, you evolve your children's relationship with food and eating as they get older. And that's, I think, fine.
Yeah. We, uh, I didn't. It wasn't really part of my long-term master plan. I just sort of did it. Is that I said, X, Y, and Z, those are snacks. Uh, A, B, and C, those are treats.
Yeah.
So oh, I'm hungry. Can I have a snack? Yeah, you can have a snack. And then they go grab something from the treat area. I'm like, whoa, 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 that's a treat. I said snack. Let's go grab a snack instead. And like, there's like, oh, okay, like, and it just, not that there wasn't arguments as they became little wannabe sugar addicts, but it just made those early years way easier. Is that they understood that there's treats and there's snacks, and they're about the same size, but they're made up of different things, and there's a time and a place. Yeah.
I think that that's exactly the right way to think about it. That's how I think about it also. Whereas if you're going to eat something every single day at 3 o'clock, then maybe that shouldn't be a treat. Like maybe that should be something very nutrient dense, and that a treat is a treat. And there should also be room in a healthy, flexible diet for treats, but maybe that's not like your everyday go-to thing. You know what I mean?
And then you mentioned like that with Halloween. I'm not sure if my wife made this up. I have a feeling she picked it up off of Instagram or something. But it's the candy fairy. So the tooth fairy will come take your tooth and give you some money under your pillow. But the candy fairy, so at the end of Halloween, you pick like, if you have 70 pieces of candy, you pick like 5 to 10 pieces that you want to keep in the house. And you can eat a couple that night, but that's about it. And the rest you put in a bucket and you leave it on the front doorstep. And the candy fairy comes and gives you a toy for it. And so with our
So
young one,
that'll work when your
so
kids are little. That works when your kids are little. So as they get older, here's what we do is we let them keep a pre-negotiated amount.
okay.
And then we tell for every Reese's product you get, we will give you a quarter. For every Mounds and Almond Joy, we will give you a quarter. Everything else is a penny. So don't bring home crappy candy for mom and dad. We will pay you for the good stuff, And do not fill us up with Tootsie Rolls and Smarties and stuff that we don't want. You will not get paid
Oh,
for that. So choose your candy wisely.
I I like that quite a bit. And my wife is a big Reese's advocate. So yeah, wow. That will definitely I'll discuss that with her tonight. And when the kids get sick of the candy fairy, I think we'll model your business plan.
Yeah, it's good. You're teaching them about incentives, right? Like you have to incentivize them to bring home the candy that you actually want.
This podcast is the Winning Wellness Podcast. And by that, it might mean that somebody is unwell and they need to win back their wellness and just get back to feeling good. Or it might mean that they are competitive, they are driven, they are achieving goals, whether it's a goal to their self or they're competing against other people. Um, but within that, what is something that you think everybody can do more of or focus on?
I mean, I think that especially in the gut health realm where I am, I'm seeing more and more commercialization and product and supplements. Like there's such a huge industry now around gut health supplements, probiotics, prebiotics, greens powders, all these like, gut health enhancement products. And I have to tell you that the trick to digestive well-being is rarely found in a pill bottle. And there's a huge asterisk next to that because there's probably about a half a dozen supplements that are in my toolkit that I talk about in my books that I think can be life-changing, but they are not, $100 specialized spore-based probiotic, prebiotic, symbiotics. Like they're not based on your own stool testing. It's magnesium if you are constipated. It's a bulking fiber if you have to adjust your stool form. It's peppermint oil if you've got cramping. I mean, it's sodium alginate if you have acid reflux. There are some very specific, not crazy expensive, easy peasy solutions that come in a bottle that can be life changing. But most of that other stuff that's being marketed to you is to line somebody's pockets. And it's not going to make you healthier and it's not going to like revolutionize your gut health. And I do not take a probiotic. I do not give my kids probiotics. I rarely recommend probiotics. Most of the prebiotics are going to make you gassy as heck, including the greens powders with prebiotics. And so, you know, if you're really serious about wellness and gut health, excuse me, it's going to be found in figuring out the real minimally processed, nutrient dense foods that feel good in your body. And that might be a different constellation of nutrient dense real foods that feel good in your body than somebody else's. But your gut microbiome thrives on plants and on real food. And so figuring out what constellation of plants you can afford to eat, you enjoy eating that feel good in your body, and figure out how to get as many of them in your diet as possible, whether it be in smoothies or soups, if eating them whole and intact is a problem for you. And to stop thinking about silver bullet solutions and pills and supplements as this sort of path to wellness, because it's not. And the science doesn't support that as really what your gut needs to thrive.
Well said. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, what question should I ask you that I haven't asked you?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I'm really glad you didn't ask me what I had for lunch today. I don't know. I mean, we talked about probiotics and supplements and how I'm not a huge fan. We talked about diet dogmatism, which is a really big thing for me. Um, I don't know. I even, one thing that we talked about very early in this conversation is about, when you had seen a lot of doctors and when you were having problems and you weren't getting the help that you needed. It's also been my experience that when people have a disappointing experience with sort of like, a conventional, Western doctor, whatever you want to call it, then they kind of make a 180 and go completely into the alternative medicine world, which I think can lead a lot of people down a rabbit hole of like, thousands of dollars of supplements and like all sorts of crazy tests that aren't really like scientifically validated. And like that also rarely leads to a good place. what I tell people is the opposite of an inattentive or unhelpful Western doctor is not alternative medicine. It's an attentive, it's an attentive, caring, focused, evidence-based doctor. And so if you're not being heard or listened to, in the world of evidence-based medicine, then you want to find someone in evidence-based medicine who will hear you and listen to you, rather than just completely abandon all, evidence-based medicine and kind of go down that rabbit hole that can lead to just a lot of harmful supplementation, a lot of very expensive stuff that, I don't know that is really has a great track record in terms of making people better.
Yeah. And do you have any comment on maybe like your general practitioner? You go and talk to them about whether it's nutrition or gut health and things like that. It's sort of popular to talk. It's sort of popular to point out how little nutrition education is given in med school. So, have you? And I had issues when I was trying to pursue information for myself. So is that just like pretty typical experience for people?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's not what your internist is there for. Like, your internist is not a nutritionist. Like, they're not there to get, like, to really break down your diet and see what you eat and give you very specific to you diet advice. Like, they're going to give you some pretty generic advice, which is fine, like, as a starting place, which is like, oh, you're constipated, try to eat more fiber, like, um some basic stuff that they can give you. But the best thing that they can give you is a referral to a dietitian. Like, they don't have to know, they just have to know who to send. And you can ask for that. If you want to know more about food and nutrition, ask for a referral. Do you know any great dietitians? Have any of your patients had a good experience with somebody who's really helped them? You don't need them to give you the advice. You need them to set you on a path. Like, a good primary care doctor is like a quarterback. They kind of like help oversee the process. They kind of set the plays, but you might end up, seeing a gastroenterologist for specialty issues, or a dietitian, or, any kind of specialist, but they're overseeing the process and kind of keeping tabs on all of it, and, kind of collecting all the info so that they have a really great picture of you as a whole person and all the care that you're getting. But they don't necessarily have to be the person that's giving you all that specialized care. Like, that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're a bad doctor. They're there to, when you're sick, like, to help you get better. They're there for routine blood work to kind of monitor blood sugars and cholesterol, and, and like some of the basic healthcare maintenance stuff as you age, and making sure you're getting your vaccinations when you turn 50 to get your shingles vaccine. Like, they're there to kind of look at you, from an overall wellness perspective. But if you've got specific problems, then they need to send you to a specific person who can help you with that.
Yeah, you gotta push through and find your specialist.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
build your team. You have to have your awesome team of people, and like, it can be hard to find your team. Like, I've had plenty of patients come to our practice and say, like, I've seen like 3 or 4 different gastroenterologists, and I finally found this one, usually woman, in your practice, and she's amazing. And where has she been all my life? And like, she's so different than all my other doctors, and like, I'm so happy she's on my team, right? And like, there are great doctors out there, both genders, all over the country. But sometimes, you got to kiss a lot of frogs to find your your so-called prince. And I think it's true with healthcare providers. It is, you have to find someone who you feel really connected with, who you feel that they listen to you, that you really feel is like on your team. And then once you build your team of who you need on it, I mean, I think that's when really wellness happens and really great care happens, because they know you and you trust them, and you're not second guessing them, because there's like a trust and there's a history there.
Great. Very, very good. Um, you've helped me out a whole bunch. I've used your information to help out other people. If somebody's listening to this and they just want to go straight to the source, how do they get a hold of you? How do they learn from you? Maybe get an appointment or something.
Sure. So, well, I have a personal website, which is just my name, tamaraduker.com, or thebloatedbellywhisperer.com. But I practice out of New York, Gastroenterology Associates, and that website is nigahealth.com, and that's how you can make an appointment with me. Um, but, I'm online. If you Google any GI symptom you're having and my name, you will probably find an article that I've written at some point over the past decade about your problem. Why do airplanes make me bloated? Surprise, surprise. I've written probably 2 articles about that. Like any issue that you think seltzer, any issue you're having, Google it with my name and you'll probably find some advice that I've given about it. I've been doing this for a while, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was really good to meet you and to chat with you. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. I'll have to Google your name and COVID because I got SIBO, and then a couple years later I got COVID, and COVID shut my I don't know if you had people rolling through with that, but man, I could eat meat, and that was it. And
Yeah, it actually happened to my I shouldn't actually say who it is because it's personal. A relative of mine after COVID stopped being able to digest carbohydrates completely for like years. Like it would just give her complete diarrhea. We tested her up and down for every possible thing we could think of that would
yeah,
cause carbs. Nothing was coming back, but it was just like this switch was flipped after COVID. It was the weirdest thing.
that is super similar to what I had. And you know, a few weeks later, my wife is like, what do you think you're like? Are you doing like the carnivore thing now or whatever? I was just like, everything besides meat hurts my stomach.
Mhm.
And and so there was probably like 10 weeks of just carnivore, but about 16 months of restricted eating. I've only just now, from 2 Augusts ago, I've only just now in the last couple months like been able to start processing like plant products pretty regularly. I was on it. uh,
Yeah, I mean, COVID is a black box, you know, like we can't always, I mean, some of the stuff we're starting to understand what it's doing, but not all of it. Some of it is still very inexplicable.
yeah. I went to along my path for that, and I didn't want to bring it up during the episode because I had a feeling this might be the conversation. But I went to a GI specialist, and he came in, and I explained the when COVID left my lips, he like closed his clipboard, and he was in the room for about 40 seconds and he was just like, we don't know what COVID is doing, like, and he was out of the room so fast.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, I find that just, I mean, very disrespectful, right? Like somebody like made this appointment is paying for your time, like at least listen.
yeah, they that was disappointing, but um separate from my SIBO issues, which your text helped me with. And then, but that COVID thing, it just would not relent, and it would not free up pain-free omnivore diet. So pretty funny that I spend like 2 decades learning how to eat really healthy, and then I just I just have to throw all that out the window and go carnivore for a few months. It was
I mean, that's what we're talking about before, right? Like there's things that are objectively healthy and nutritious, and then there's how it feels in your body. And sometimes those two things don't always overlap so well. And you have to listen to your body if you want to function.
yeah. So it was adapt or die, but
Yeah.
yeah, interesting. Well, gosh, thank you so much. I truly appreciate your time tonight, as well as the authoring that you've done.
My
Uh,
pleasure. I'm glad it was
yeah,
so helpful.
it was big time. Saved me a lot of pain.
Awesome. Well, thanks
Yeah,
for spreading the word. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Winning Wellness Podcast. Please keep in mind that all views expressed within the show are not a reflection of any universities or organizations that I may be affiliated with. If you have any questions or suggestions for future shows, please reach out through Instagram, where I can be found with the title name of Mitch Schwartzman.